Good. All right, we're going to go for basically about an hour. And for all of the classes, Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3 is what you're looking at. The ideology stuff I'm going to give you on the second exam, and I've gotten your beliefs. I haven't quite plotted them yet, but I'll go ahead and throw that in there. So Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3 are the terms. Let's just start with these, and why don't we just pick it up with Chapter 1. What kind of questions do y'all have from Chapter 1? Anybody, anything at all? Go ahead, Nicole. 111 is actually 115, and it's the number of peaceful midterm and presidential elections in American history. The number of peaceful midterm and presidential elections. If you remember, presidential election is every 4 years. The midterm election is the 2 years in between. So every 2 years, there's always an election. So that's what that is.
Wait, can you repeat that? So you said it's 115.
Oh, it's on the tape. You'll be able to listen to it as much as you want. What other questions have y'all got? Go ahead, Angel.
So then is presidential elections a separate term? Or is that
Presidential elections is a separate term. Y'all remember what we talked about with presidential elections, and I believe specifically it was 1992, 1996, and 2000.
We talked about how there was only a plurality, not a majority of like the people who supported, who voted for any of the candidates who won.
Yeah, we did. If you remember in 1992, Bush Daddy lost to Bill Clinton. It was 43 to 37%.
Yeah.
57% of the American people voted against Bill Clinton, the man that became president. In 1996, Bill Clinton beat Bob Dole 49 to 40%. In other words, 51% of the American people voted against the man that became president. And then if you go back to 2000, it was W against Gore. And basically, I think it was like 48 to 48. In other words, about 52% of the American people voted against the man that became president. And I had mentioned to you this idea of majority rules. Well, in those three elections, it didn't happen. And then if you go back and you look, the most recent election with Trump and Hillary, majority didn't rule in that one. But again, I think in that one, Clinton beat him by about 3 million votes.
Yeah.
But so a majority of the people voted against the man that became president. By the same token, they got the presidency because of the Electoral College that gave them the majority of something. What else have y'all got from the terms?
You didn't talk about you said you were going to talk about one of the one that went to Congress, but you never did in our class.
The one that went to
There was
Congress.
one presidential election where no one got.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, but I don't want to confuse anybody today. What else have you got from Chapter 1? Go ahead, Nola. Order. Order. Freedom, order, and equality run together. What was freedom?
The freedom to wave your arms around.
Okay, I guess that's one example of freedom, but I need a good example of freedom. Go ahead, Brenda.
Power to do what you want as far as acting or like the way you act, speak. So like freedom of religion, freedom of speech.
Yes. Yeah. Freedom basically is talking about decisions that you can make. And these could be like political decisions, the right to vote, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. This could be the idea of, oh golly, I don't know, the idea to pursue an education, to pursue a career, the idea to be married or already be married, the idea to divorce, the idea to have kids. These could be personal, these could be legal, these could be economic decisions. And the arm swinging. If you remember, what I had said was, some people would say that freedom is the ability to swing your arms as much as you want. But the problem is that the more that you swing your arms, Erica, what happens? You get closer and closer. What's that? You can get hit. And the idea is that freedom is supposed to stop basically at the bridge of somebody else's nose, which takes us to order. If there's too much freedom, nobody really has freedom, or nobody has order. What was order? Anybody?
Rules that govern society.
Rules that govern society. If some people want to be free from the different classes, some people want to be safe. Some people want to be protected. Some people don't want to have to worry about crime or getting robbed or getting invaded by another country kind of a thing. And order is a big deal. What was equality?
Everyone has the same freedoms, but everyone is equal the same law.
Yeah, everybody is basically treated equally by the government. So they have the same freedoms, they're also subject to the same laws. And if you remember, I asked all the classes, what is it that you value most? Is it freedom, is it order, or is it equality? And surprisingly, I think equality won. It's not usually equality. Usually for the younger folks, it's freedom that wins. But think about this within the context of some of the articles. maybe be thinking about, okay, in the Catholic school teacher case, what was a good example of freedom, or what was a good example of order, or what would have been a good example of equality? Relate them back maybe to a specific article. So kind of keep that thought in mind. What else have you got from this first chapter? Go ahead, Giovanni.
Who, question mark?
Who? Yeah. This actually might deal more with chapter 2 because we're talking about the Declaration of Independence. Who was it that wrote it?
The old guys.
The old guys.
Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Robert Hayes.
Good Lord, yeah. And they were all pictured on the $2 bill when I showed y'all that. They were all pictured, if you'll recall, in Schoolhouse Rock. Having all those names would be really impressive, I'm not going to lie. Jefferson is considered the father of the Declaration, with Franklin, with Livingston, with so on and so forth. But the other piece to this is, if they wrote it, who did they write it about?
The King of England.
How do you know?
They kept referring to him as
He endeavored to prevent, he obstructed, he and all of these negative words. They were blaming the king. And who was it written ultimately for? France. Yeah, every once in a while you have to have a nice reference to France, even if is somebody. Zoom in on Nola really quick. She's from France. So yeah, you can share this with your friends back home. Understand on this, France, it was really for allies in general, but France was the one that really bid on this. And what was the purpose behind the Declaration of Independence?
To justify their Declaration of Independence.
Legal justification for separation from Great Britain.
It's just not because it's not just because we were mad. We have real reasons for being mad.
Yeah, and I think I had mentioned to you that there was an unusually high number of highly educated people, in fact, in the colonists. They made a very strong legal justification for separation, written by Jefferson, written about the king, written for, ultimately, potential allies, which France jumped in on this. And then, of course, you could also get into some things with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Maybe keep that in mind as you maybe watch that video again, dealing with Schoolhouse Rock. What other questions? I think I saw. Go ahead, Angel.
I had a question about one of the questions for chapter 1.
Okay.
The first one, what are considered participatory strains for white Americans, African Americans, and Hispanics?
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Anything else from the terms?
Flag burning. I know that you gave us an example of like a Supreme Court case,
Yeah.
a guy in Texas. Is that what you want us to?
Yeah. There were two, and I think one class did not deal with the flag salute case, but everybody dealt with flag burning. Flag burning, if you remember, was that Texas versus Johnson case, and the Texas versus Johnson case was basically the guy that stole the flag outside of Reunion Arena in Dallas, outside of the Republican National Convention. Do you remember what he yelled? Do you remember what he said? Anybody? Oh,
I
God.
don't remember the case.
Red, white, and blue, we spit on you. Reagan, Mondale, who will it be? It doesn't matter. World War III. Uh-oh. What else happened in this case?
Wasn't he outside like a poll? Like office poll with the voting?
He was actually outside of the Republican National Convention. So they were getting ready to nominate Reagan as president. He stole somebody's flag and he lit it on fire. Remember what they charged him with? Flag desecration. Yeah, they did charge him with flag desecration. And what were the arguments? Anybody? Why should Texas say we need to prosecute this? And why would he say, in fact, that I should be allowed to do it?
His argument was clearly freedom of speech. And that's the only argument that he would have, and it's a strong one.
Okay, his argument was freedom of speech. And if you remember on this, he lit a flag on fire. And when the court considered this, they said, is he trying to send a message? Well, he lit a flag on fire. And everybody seems to understand what happens, what that means when you light a flag on fire. Now, in fairness, some people thought it might be okay to burn a flag even if their parents didn't. We had this discussion in a few classes, but nonetheless, y'all understood it. So the question that they asked was, okay, is he sending a message? And the second one was, is this message likely to be received? And they said yes to both questions, so this was considered a speech issue under the First Amendment. Now let's go back. What was Texas's argument?
I don't remember talking about this in our class.
Isn't it that flag is like sacred
flag is sacred to people. The idea is that if you're burning the flag, then in fact people fought and died for this flag. The flag is a symbol of freedom. This is something that is held sacred to people, bless you, for many reasons. And as such, you should not actually allow this because of its sacredness. Somebody actually came up and saluted the flag while it was burning. Supreme Court, did they say it was legal or no?
Yeah, I think
Why?
it's protected under the First Amendment.
They said, well, yeah, they said it. Why did they say it was protected under the First Amendment?
It was symbolic expression.
It was considered symbolic expression. It was considered, in fact, that this was a message and it would likely be received. And ultimately, do you remember what they said about this argument about it being sacred?
No.
They said, in fact, okay, if this is a sacred symbol, this is exactly the kind of thing that we need to burn because it further demonstrates exactly how free we are. If you start placing limits on what can be burned, then in fact that's not really ultimately free speech. And they did say, and let me stress this too, they said there was no violence in this case because remember the man was saluting while the flag was burning. Somebody actually came by and swept up the remains of the flag. They said, however, if violence were to break out in a future case, then in fact, guess what? We may actually rule differently on this. And I think I had mentioned to several of the classes, don't use my name, but if you see somebody burning a flag and you go up and you punch them in the face, that would be a really interesting court case because you could argue that burning the flag would be considered as hate speech and this would have incited some violence. This actually might not be protected because violence had broken out, but it didn't in the Texas case. What